Hello and welcome back. Now we're going to handle swapping items and preventing our swap animation from playing on the inventory bar. Now let's just take a look at what happens when we have a full inventory and we swap weapons. Now I'm going to go to one of these weapons, say the third item slot, and I'm going to swap with this weapon on the ground. Take a look at the icon on the weapon slot and you'll see that it raises when it swaps, and we want that to only happen when switching between weapons in the inventory. So we're going to handle that in this video. Now let's go into our character class in shootercharacter.cpp and let's take a look at the equip weapon function. Now here is where we broadcast this delegate, and the delegate sends this information to the inventory bar so that it can play that icon animation. Well, when we equip a weapon, we can include a boolean here in this function for swapping. So let's go ahead and add a boolean to equip weapon. So in shootercharacter.h, I'm going to search for equip weapon, and I'm going to add a boolean, and it's going to be called bswapping, and I'm going to give it a default value of false, so that way we can still call equip weapon without passing in a bool, and it'll be false by default. Now here in shootercharacter.cpp, let's add that boolean here, bool bswapping, and we're going to check to make sure that this is false before we broadcast. So right down here where we check to see if equipped weapon is null pointer, if it is null pointer, we broadcast this. But if it's not a null pointer, we have the else case. Well, we can make this an else if and check bswapping. But we want to check if bswapping is false, because if bswapping is false, then we can broadcast the delegate. So when are we going to call equip weapon with this boolean? Well, it's going to be false unless we actually pass in true. So when do we want it to be true? Well, we want bswapping to be true when we're swapping. So let's go to swap weapon and see what that looks like. So here in swap weapon, we're calling equip weapon here. Now since we're calling equip weapon from swap weapon, we can simply pass this true value in here. Okay, so that should take care of preventing the icon animation from playing. Now before we compile and test this out, I want to show you another thing that I would like to give you the option of changing, and that's when we have weapons in our inventory. Whenever we swap weapons, we are prevented from swapping a weapon during the equipping animation. For example, if I go from 1 to 2 to 1 again, I can swap back and forth just fine unless I speed this up. See, I'm pressing the buttons very rapidly, and I'm not able to swap until I'm done equipping. That's because we have to be in the unoccupied state in order to swap weapons. But when it comes to shooter games and action games in general, the controls need to be quick and tight, and sometimes you might want to swap your weapon before we're even done playing the equip animation. So I'm going to show you how to allow this to happen without allowing us to swap the weapon during other crucial actions such as reloading or firing the weapon. So let's go back to our exchange inventory items function, and here in exchange inventory items we have this if statement that gives us an early out, an early return, and we'll have an early return if any of these three expressions are true. One is if the current item index is the new item index. One is if the new item index is greater than or equal to the inventory size. And then finally, if the combat state is unoccupied. But we want to allow swapping items if the combat state is equipping, which is not unoccupied. This is a pretty easy change to make. One way we can do this is instead of having an early return, instead I'm just going to wrap this entire function in an if check. I'm going to say if And I'll put everything in this function inside the if. And what's going to go in the if? Well, we want the current item index to not be equal to the new item index. So we're going to use this condition, only we're going to change the double equals to the not equals. And it looks like I lost an A here on the auto, so I'm going to put that back in. Now we also need for new item index to be less than the inventory size. So we're going to say and right here and paste this in, and instead of greater than or equal, we're going to say less than. So essentially what we're doing is we're inverting the comparison operator and inverting the logical or and turning it into a logical and. So this is going to have another and for this we can have an expression that will evaluate to true if combat state is unoccupied. So we're going to take this and say combat state is equal to unoccupied. So we're going to change this from not equal to, or we're going to have an or in here, and we're going to say combat state is equal to equipping. And we'll go ahead and just to avoid confusion, the parentheses will only go around this compound statement. Basically, this statement will evaluate to true if combat state is unoccupied or combat state is ECS equipping. And then we don't need this first line here. Now, I know that this is a big, long if statement. It's actually really long and horrific. And we can make this more readable if we want to simply make a local boolean. So we can create a const local bool, and we can call this b can exchange items. And we can set it to these three main conditions. One is current item index is not equal to new item index. And the next is new item index is less than inventory.num. And then finally we have this big one, combat state is equal to unoccupied or combat state is equal to equipping. So we'll copy that and place that here, and we'll put a semicolon. So here we can see that we have a bool, b can exchange items, and it's equal to these. I'll put them each on their own lines. And then we can simply use b can exchange items in the if check, which has all of the logic for the function inside of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and compile and test these changes out. Okay, so let's go back into the editor. Okay, so let's go ahead and swap a weapon. And it looks like we're still getting the animation being called, so let's see why. And it looks like in swap weapon, we're calling equip weapon with false, but we should have actually passed in true because we are swapping the weapon. And so we're going to set b swapping to true. So let's go ahead and compile this again. There we go. And let's go ahead and swap again. So I'm going to go ahead and fill up the inventory. I'm going to switch to one of our weapons, and I'm going to swap. And now we see that that inventory icon animation is not getting called. So that's exactly what I wanted. Now for swapping weapons quickly. I'm going to go through these weapons. And I'm able to swap weapons before the equip animation is finished. This is excellent because if we're in the middle of battle and we need to swap quickly, and we changed our minds about the weapon we swapped to, then we can swap again really quickly, and that could mean life or death in the game. Okay, that's going to conclude this video. In the next video, we're going to work on creating an animated icon for when we're hovering over a weapon, and we'd like this animated icon to show us a sort of moving square, zeroing in on the slot that our weapon will go in if we pick it up. So we'll do that in the next video. We'll see you then.